You might think there were dinosaurs living in the water. You are wrong. There wasn't even a single species. You think mosasaurs and pliosaurs were dinosaurs. Dead wrong. They were just reptiles, not dinosaurs. Even Spinosaurus, the fellow that seemed most capable of entering the water, just stood by the riverbank scooping up fish. It would run away after scooping. Throughout the entire Mesozoic era, not a single dinosaur truly lived in the water. So here comes the question. During those 100 million years when dinosaurs ruled the land, whose territory was the water after all? The answer will send chills down your spine. Because the things in that sea were more ancient than dinosaurs, more brutal than dinosaurs, and their extinction time was much later than that of the dinosaurs. Today, in episode 11 of the General History of Earth, we are not going to the land. We are diving down to see what exactly ruled the oceans of the Jurassic. The Jurassic period, about 201 million to 145 million years ago. Earth's sea level was nearly 200 meters higher than it is today. Virtually, the entire European continent was soaked in a warm, shallow sea. Pangaea was still slowly tearing apart. The Atlantic Ocean was still taking its first wobbling steps. Brand new ocean basins were opening up across the Earth's surface. The water temperature of this ocean was higher than today. Nutrients were more abundant than today, and the density of life was suffocatingly high. But a high density of life meant high-intensity competition. That was no azure paradise. It was a super hunting ground of survival of the fittest, where every second counted. Ruling this ocean were not fish, nor early sharks, but a group of reptiles that returned to the sea from the land. They were close relatives of dinosaurs, yet they took a completely different evolutionary path, utterly abandoning the land, betting their entire fate on this crisis-ridden deep sea. The first creature is called Ichthyosaurs. Hearing this name, you might think it's some kind of cute creature. Put that thought away. The eyes of Ichthyosaurs were nearly 23 centimeters in diameter, making them some of the largest eyes among vertebrates in known Earth history. It wasn't just that the eyes were big. Those were eyeballs bigger than your fist, embedded on both sides of its head, coldly scanning the surrounding darkness. Why did it need such large eyes? Because it had to dive down into the deep water zone where sunlight completely vanished to hunt. After studying its eye structure, scientists estimated that the diving depth of Ichthyosaurs could exceed 600 meters. It was one of the few deep-sea hunters in the Jurassic Ocean. Ichthyosaurs belonged to the Ichthyosaur family. This group began evolving from the Triassic period 250 million years ago. They were the earliest batch of vertebrates in history to completely abandon land and dedicate their entire lives to the ocean. Look at its appearance: a streamlined body, a vertical crescent-shaped tail fin, and limbs that had degenerated into paddle-like flippers. Its degree of similarity to modern dolphins made 19th century scientists drop their jaws when they first saw the fossils. But this wasn't due to a close genetic relationship. This was great evolutionary minds thinking alike. Completely different forms of life, facing the exact same ocean, independently evolved almost identical, perfect body shapes. In biology, this is called convergent evolution, and ichthyosaurs are one of the most shocking examples of this phenomenon. What's even more admirable is that ichthyosaurs did not lay eggs. They directly gave birth to live young in the sea. This meant they never needed to step foot on land even once in their entire lives. They were the first reptiles, in the truest sense, to make the ocean their home. However, what sent the most chills down people's spines in the Jurassic Ocean was not the ichthyosaurs, but the plesiosaurs. Imagine this scene. In the gloomy seawater, a huge body remains almost completely motionless, floating as quietly as a reef. You are completely unaware of its existence. Then a long, slender neck silently extends out from the darkness, like a ghostly tentacle, locking onto the target at a speed you cannot react to, and then a strike. The number of cervical vertebrae in Pliosaurs during the Jurassic period was usually between 30 and 50. By the Cretaceous period, the number of neck vertebrae in some species even exceeded 70. Yet normal mammals, including you, and giraffes always have only 7 cervical vertebrae. Its neck accounted for more than half of its total body length, making it one of the most extreme vertebrate neck proportions in history. This neck was not a burden. It was a weapon. They did not need to chase their prey. They only needed to wait for the prey to swim into their firing range, and then use this sophisticated biological crossbow to complete the kill. In the stomachs of Pliosaur scientists have discovered a large number of smooth pebbles. They swallowed these stones, not only to aid digestion, but potentially also to regulate buoyancy in the water. Creatures from over 100 million years ago had already evolved such an ingenious bodily system. Sometimes I can't help but think that when it comes to evolution, it never plays by human logic, yet it never takes a wrong turn. However, all the aforementioned creatures were nothing but prey in front of one particular hunter. It is called the Pliosaur. Pliosaurs were close relatives of Plesiosaurs, but they took a completely opposite evolutionary path. Plesiosaurs evolved increasingly longer necks and increasingly smaller heads, while Pliosaurs did the exact reverse, compressing their necks to the absolute shortest and making their heads the absolute largest. Among the large Pliosaur skull fossils discovered so far, and this is just the Pliosaur skull itself, the longest is close to 2 meters. A single tooth alone is over 20 centimeters long. A 2-meter long head. What does that even mean? It already far exceeds the height of most humans. Based on biomechanical reconstructions and estimates, scientists found that the bite force of an apex pliosaur was utterly astonishing. It was enough to shatter bones and tear flesh, making it the most powerful bite force in the Jurassic Ocean. What's even more terrifying is that it wasn't a clumsy brute that could only charge with raw force. Its 4 massive paddle-like flippers exerted power simultaneously, allowing this behemoth, which measured 10 to 12 meters long and weighed over 10 tons, to change direction in the water at a speed that was simply unbelievable. A colossal size paired with an unimaginable agility. This combination has only appeared once in the entire history of Earth. An Ichthyosaur could only flee for its life upon encountering it, while a Plesiosaur stood almost zero chance of survival. What is even more hair-raising is that paleontologists have found deep bite marks on multiple fossils of large marine reptiles that perfectly match the teeth of Pliosaurs. This means that it would readily devour its own kind as well. The Jurassic Ocean had no rules, only one absolute law. You were either the hunter or you were the prey. There was no third option. Aside from these, an even more bizarre creature was hiding in the Jurassic Ocean. Metriorhynchus, as the name implies, it was a close relative of crocodiles, but it had fully adapted to marine life. Its limbs had degenerated into flippers. Its tail had evolved a tail fin similar to that of an ichthyosaur, and its entire body was even covered in smooth skin, rather than heavy armor plating. This was designed to reduce drag in the water. It is hard not to draw a parallel to the evolutionary path taken by today's whales and dolphins. The similarity is striking. Different species in different eras, confronting the exact same ocean. Time and time again, life has independently figured out the exact same answer for survival. This is no coincidence. This is the law of nature. The demands that the ocean places on all life have never changed. Sometimes I stand by the seaside, looking at this deep blue before me, finding it beautiful, finding it tranquil. But if time could wind back 180 million years, at this very same sea, along this very same coastline, beneath the surface lay a terrifying world that our brains fundamentally cannot truly comprehend. They ultimately vanished, but the fossils they left behind are an epic love letter written to us by Earth, spanning across 180 million years. They have never truly disappeared. They have merely changed their form to continue existing in this world. They exist in the research of scientists. They exist in this video you are watching today. And they exist in that ancient deep sea conjured up in your mind right now. Life has never been a straight line, but rather a vast ocean. Some waves crash and break, yet the sea they once propelled keeps surging forward. This concludes episode 11 of the General History of Earth. I look forward to our next encounter. You might think humans reached the top of the food chain through intelligence. You are wrong. The truth is that our ancestors accidentally discovered that all animals are allergic to stones. As long as they come into contact with high-speed flying stones, they knock out. This secret is hidden 23 million years ago, in an era called the Neogene period. That was the craziest battlefield of life in Earth's history, 100 times more thrilling than any sci-fi movie. First, let's meet the most shocking representative of the Neogene period. On the central Eurasian grasslands, there was a creature with a shoulder height of nearly 4.8 meters and a conservatively estimated weight of 20 tons. What does a weight of 20 tons mean? It is equivalent to 4 modern African bush elephants combined. It is called Paraceratherium. It is the largest terrestrial mammal known in Earth's history. When it raised its long neck, it could easily reach leaves at a height of over 7 meters, just like a living biological crane. On the grasslands of that era, adult Paraceratherium had no natural predators. Even the apex predators of the time looked like harmless small pets in front of it. It didn't even need to fight. Just taking a casual step forward was enough to scare away a pack of predators. But such a colossal giant was ultimately just a peaceful herbivore. The ones that truly made the Neogene continent terrifying were those professional killers. First up is the bear dog. Don't be fooled by its name. It was neither a bear nor a dog, but an independent branch of the suborder Caniformia. Imagine a monster that possessed the explosive power and heavy skeleton of a grizzly bear, yet also had the keen sense of smell and high-running stamina of a wolf. This was the bear dog. The largest species of bear dog could weigh over 500 kilograms, with a skull nearly 50 centimeters long. Its massive jaws could directly crush the thickest leg bones of large herbivores. They hunted in packs on the grasslands, and no prey they locked eyes on could escape their relentless long-distance pursuit. However, even the powerful bear dogs had to remain highly vigilant on this continent because they shared the land with an equally terrifying rival, the Barbarophilus. They were the pinnacle of evolution for saber-toothed nimravids, possessing 2 curved sabers that were over 20 centimeters long. Unlike the long-distance running style of bear dogs, Barbarophilus were masters of ambush. Their short, stout, and extremely muscular limbs allowed them to pin down prey weighing several tons in an instant before driving those 2 terrifying sabers precisely into the prey's throat. The confrontation between bear dogs and Barbarophilus was the ultimate battle between strength and assassination skills, playing out across the entire Eurasian continent for millions of years. But while these mammalian masters were locked in fierce combat, a silent threat from the reptile kingdom was quietly rising. In the forests and swamps of Europe, there lived a giant monitor lizard with a total length of over 4 meters. It was much larger than modern Komodo dragons. It hid in the shadows of the dense forest, with toxic bacteria and anticoagulants inside its mouth. Even if a mammal managed to break free from its bite, it would slowly bleed to death in agony days later. This was an era when giants stood tall and masters emerged in abundance. Every day, life and death dramas of survival of the fittest were being violently performed on this continent. However, what truly changed the historical direction of this planet was not these apex predators, but a weak and unremarkable group in East Africa. They were the early ancestors of humans, the Australopithecus. They stood less than 1.2 meters tall, weighed less than 40 kilograms, and had a brain capacity only about 1/3 of a modern human's. Compared to a Smilodon, they had no sharp claws. Compared to a bear dog, they lacked raw strength. And compared to the giant monitor lizards of the past, they weren't even a fraction of their size. On the African savanna at that time, almost any predator could easily treat them as a defenseless moving snack. So, how did such a weak species survive that brutal meat grinder of an era? The secret lies in the fact that they did something no other animal on Earth had ever dared to do. They stood up completely. Bipedalism completely freed their front limbs. Those hands, which no longer needed to touch the ground for walking, began to pick up stones from the ground. Initially, it might have just been a subconscious throw, driven by extreme fear. But when a stone hit a predator's head with a thud, causing the beast to roar in pain and retreat, the ancestors of humans unlocked the ultimate cheat code of nature. They discovered that the physical limits of animals were completely useless against high-speed flying stones. No matter how thick your hide or how sharp your fangs, the sudden harm is real. The pain is real. But they completely failed to understand the source of that threat. After the saber-toothed cat is struck by a stone, it doesn't think that the hominid is powerful. It only feels confused and unsettled, and then retreats out of instinct. Because what animals fear most has never been a powerful enemy, but a danger they cannot comprehend. By relying on stones, Australopithecus managed to carve out a path to survival in this brutal world of the survival of the fittest. This is the truth behind that fatal allergy at the beginning. Predators aren't truly allergic to stones. They are allergic to threats beyond their cognition. And Australopithecus was the first animal on Earth capable of actively creating threats beyond comprehension. By relying on this extraordinary survival skill, they completely shattered the established rules of the food chain. From this moment on, the scales of evolution began to quietly tilt. However, no matter how powerful a life form is, it ultimately cannot escape the judgment of time. About 2.58 million years ago, the Neogene period officially drew to a close, and the Quaternary Ice Age arrived in full force. Global temperatures plummeted, vast savannas were covered by permafrost, and ecosystems underwent a violent reorganization. A new round of mass extinction began. Those giant beasts that once ruled the land and made all living things tremble, collapsed, and met their ends one after another. Yet that once insignificant little hominid, who picked up stones to survive, survived and evolved step by step, finally standing at the very top of Earth's food chain. Now, let's pause and think for a moment. Did that grand epic saga of the Neogene really leave behind nothing but fossils? No, it left behind an extremely precious trait, and that is choice. Megalania chose absolute power, yet died of starvation. Dinotherium chose unique tools, yet was trapped by its environment. But our ancestors, on that desperate wasteland, chose the most seemingly insignificant, yet grandest weapon of all, a stone. This stone, 20 million years ago, was the history of fending off predators. 2 million years ago, it was a sharp blade for cutting flesh. 20,000 years ago, it was the flint that ignited civilization. Today, we are still throwing stones. Except the stones of today have become rockets that pierce the sky and probes that explore microscopic particles. We no longer fear predators, but the cold wind of the Neogene has never stopped blowing. It warns us that there are no permanent rulers, only eternal reverence,